In this video, I'm going to discuss how your race can impact your BTO chances. Why? Well, because in Singapore, there's this thing called the Ethnic Integration Policy or EIP. This policy was established since 1989 and strictly regulates the maximum proportion of flats that can be owned by each ethnic group within every single HDB block and neighborhood across Singapore. Because roughly 80% of Singapore's population lives in public housing, the government utilizes the EIP to legally structure demographic diversity right down to the apartment level. But before we go into the details, let's talk about what is the objective, because actually it has a very good intention. So when you apply for a BTO flat, the EIP is built directly into the computer ballot program to achieve three core national objectives. The first one is preventing the formation of ethnic enclaves. So before 1989, there's this trend emerged where specific racial groups naturally clustered together. For example, the Malay community at that time was heavily populated estates like Bedok and Tampines, while Chinese buyers highly concentrated in Hougang and also Ang Mo Kio. The objective of the EIP in a BTO launch is to basically moderate this geographic sorting from day one. It structurally guarantees that every single new BTO neighborhood constructed mirrors the actual multicultural macro demographics of Singapore. And then the second objective is to create organic opportunities for social mixing. So the government recognizes that a harmonious society cannot be achieved if different communities live in isolation from one another. By enforcing ethnic representation in every new BTO project, the policy ensures that families from different races share the same elevators, walk down the same corridors, and utilize the same common void decks. This co-location naturally ensures that children from different backgrounds grow up together, attend the exact same neighborhood schools, and cultivate inter-ethnic understanding organically from a young age. And then the third intention is to cap maximum representation at the block and neighborhood levels. To maintain a balanced mix, HDB locks in strict percentage ceiling for each ethnic category. These approximate maximum caps dictate exactly how many units are reserved for each race during a BTO launch exercise. So for example, for Chinese quota, it is capped at 84% of a neighborhood and 87% of a single block. For Malay quota, it is capped at 22% of a neighborhood and 25% of a single block, while Indian and others quota is capped at 12% of a neighborhood and 15% of a single block. Now let's talk about how the EIP directly impact your BTO ballot strategy. So understanding this policy reveals exactly why your booking probability is actually slightly more complicated than it seems. For example, you have separated pool allocation. You are never balloting against all applicants in a BTO launch. Actually, you are only balloting against the applicants within your specific ethnic quota group for that project. So not many people realize this. And then the second thing is that there's this premature booking closure. If the minority quota for a BTO block fills up completely, let's say on day 3 of a flat selection window, then any minority applicants with later queue numbers will be blocked from picking units in that specific building, even if there are physically empty units left. Those empty units are strictly locked and reserved exclusively for the remaining quota of other race. And then there's also this protection towards the minority allocation. Because minority population percentages are lower, market forces could naturally squeeze minorities out of highly popular or expensive estates. The EIP ensures a specific volume of new housing inventory is legally walled off for minority buyers in every single district. Now let's talk about what happens if you apply for a BTO, get a queue number, but there's a very limited supply for your race quota. This is particularly important to understand because nowadays, as you know, HDB implements a much harsher penalty if you are invited but did not pick a flat. Basically, if you skip your appointment or decline to pick a unit when your queue number is being called, you will incur a non-selection count, lose your first-timer priority status for one entire year, and you will have all of your ongoing HDB flat applications instantly cancelled. HDB will completely waive your non-selection penalty under only 2 specific conditions, at least as far as I know. The first one is if there are fewer than 10 BTO flats left for you to choose from when your number is being called, or if it's SBF process, then you only have less than 5 5 SBF flats to choose from. But let's say you're being called to the HDB office and then there are still 11 or more BTO units available on the board. Even if, let's say, you're only left with second floor unit facing the rubbish chute or have bad feng shui, you just have to pick one. If you walk out without booking, then the penalties will kick in immediately. If there are still more than 10 total BTO flats left in the project, but 10 or fewer flats are available for your specific race due to the ethnic integration policy or EIP quotas, HDB will waive your non-selection penalty. The rule explicitly tracks your actual realistic choices at the exact moment your queue number is called rather than just the overall physical building inventory. So how the waive triggers for your race? They have this actual availability rule where HDB evaluates the number of flats available for selection by you. If the Chinese, Malay, or Indian/others quota for that project has been heavily filled by earlier applicants, leaving 10 or fewer units open to your ethnic group, then you can freely walk out the room without choosing a flat. In such case, your status is protected. If you walk away under this very specific condition, this means you will not receive a non-selection count. Your first-timer priority status remains perfectly intact and your accumulated ballot chances will not be reset to 0. But then you might ask how to check your real-time quota. Don't guess the numbers before your appointment. You must actively monitor the live ethnic quota balances on HDB flat portal or the digital screen inside the HDB hub waiting area right before your queue number is being called. But again, the limit for BTO is 10. If there are still, let's say, 11 flats left for your race, then unfortunately you lose the waiver protection. Even if those 11 units are completely undesirable, you just have to pick one or take the penalty. Declining at that point will trigger the full penalty, stripping you of your first-timer priority for a year. Now let's talk about a very special case, which is mixed-race couple. Now, for a mixed-race couple, HDB grants you the flexibility to choose either the husband's or the wife's race as your official household ethnicity. Let's say there's a scenario where the husband is Indian but the wife is Chinese, then you must formally declare at the time of your application whether you want your household to be classified under the Chinese quota or the Indian/others quota. So it's not about following the race of the husband. It can be either one. This decision holds massive structural weight, impacting both your immediate application odds and your future financial exit strategy. Because note that once you select your household ethnicity during your first flat purchase, that decision is legally locked for the entire lifespan of your property ownership, and you cannot change this later. When you eventually want to sell your flat in the open resale market, you will be bound by the exact same chosen quota. So for example, if you choose Chinese, then you must sell to a Chinese buyer unless the block's Chinese quota happens to be below the limit. But if you choose Indian, then you must sell to an Indian or others buyer if the block's minority limits are full. To pick the best option for your mixed-race household, then consider how the two quotas compare across different stages of flat ownership. If we consider the BTO application availability, if you opt for the Chinese quota, then most likely the allocation is highly abundant. Chinese quota, in general, take up the largest slice of flats in any given BTO block, maybe roughly between 84 to 87%. But then, for Indian or others quota, it is much smaller pool. Roughly, only 12 to 15% of units in a block are allocated to this pool. And then regarding BTO non-selection penalty risk, if you opt for the Chinese quota, this is actually has higher risk because there are so many Chinese units household, it is rare for them to drop to 10 or fewer units quickly, meaning you are less likely to get a penalty waiver if you walk out. But if you opt for the Indian or others quota, it is safer in terms of penalty waiver because the pool is smaller, then the units can snap hit 10 or fewer remaining very quickly, giving you an easier out to walk away without penalty. This is of course assuming that you don't want to pick a unit for whatever reason. Now in terms of future resale pool or when it's time for you to sell after MOP, if you pick the Chinese quota, obviously you have a massive buyer pool in Singapore. It is significantly easier and faster to find a buyer later on as the vast majority of local buyers fall into this tier. But if you are under the Indian quota, then you will have restricted buyer pool. If the block's Indian/others quota hits its ceiling, then you can only sell to another minority buyer, which can depress your property value due to lower demand. I hope that's clear, but if you have any other question, feel free to leave a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye. To support my work, you can give a one-time tip by pressing the thanks button, pick the amount that you want, and click buy and send. Or you can also press the join button for exclusive contents and monthly membership. Your support means a lot to keep us independent. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye.